Hello and welcome everyone. In this video, we're going to be covering the recent election that the state of Ohio had regarding with Ohio, so-called Ohio Issue 1. Now, this was ultimately a major win for the pro-choice movement and reproductive rights for regarding to women's health care in the state of Ohio alone. And this Republican GOP-backed proposal failed in their own faces. 7% voted no and rejected the GOP's backed proposal, and 43%, just 43%, voted in favor of it. And this is, I believe, a 98% of the estimated vote in, and the race has already been called in favor of the no votes. Roughly 1.7 million voted in favor of pro-choice, basically, and 1.3 million voted in favor of the pro-life movement. Now, when it comes to Ohio Issue 1 specifically, we're talking about in this video on what they just voted on. This was not basically a fight between you like Trump or Biden. Are you Republican or are you Democrat? Because it had a lot of Republicans actually voting against it. This was not an issue whether if you're a Democrat you're gonna vote no, if you're a Republican you're gonna vote yes. No, actually Republicans voted no on this. That's how it failed, by the way. So this was more of a personal issue for women regarding their reproductive rights and the reproductive freedoms. Because if this really was are you a Trump supporter versus are you a Biden supporter, or are you a Republican or are you a Democrat, then this would definitely not be so bipartisan, or this would definitely not, it wouldn't go so much in one favor. If this was so much a Trump or Biden thing, it would definitely, or a Republican or a Democrat thing, it would definitely be closer. But since no won by, I believe, 15 points, it actually Republicans actually had to agree with the pro-choice stance right here. No voted in favor of pro-choice. So if you are in favor of pro-choice or women reproductive rights regarding abortion specifically, you would have voted no. And if you are in favor of pro-life, and if you are anti-abortion, you probably would have voted yes. Now, I believe if this were to be passed, yes would have gotten 50 to 51%. They fell slightly short at 43%. So it's not like they got, destroyed, which they kind of did, because like I mentioned, this is a GOP-backed proposal that failed on their own faces. Now, the reason why Republicans did this was because in November, Ohio is going to vote on whether to codify abortion rights. And Republicans saw this, and they knew this was coming, so they had to scramble for help. So what they decided to do is come out with Ohio Issue 1, and basically come out with a proposal before we get to November, so that way it won't go into Democrat or pro-choice favorite, their favor, because Ohio voters in November will be voting on whether to codify abortion rights. So Republicans had to scramble, and they had to come out with a proposal that was backed by the GOP on basically to make it a raise of voting threshold to a 60% majority, and that would make it harder to codify abortion rights. So basically, on Ohio Issue 1, a GOP-backed proposal, what this would do is make it harder to codify abortion rights, and it failed. Codifying abortion rights did not get harder, even though that is banned in the state. Abortion is kind of banned in the state, not fully, but a lot of it is banned in the state. Republicans, Democrats got together and they voted no on this. And what does this ultimately mean for, the 2024 election? If Republicans, hear me out, if Republicans run on the issue of pro-life in 2024 or anti-abortion in 2024, they are ultimately going to lose the election. Whether it's the Senate race, the governor's race, or even the general election race. If Republicans run on the stance of pro-life, if that's their number one issue heading into 2024's elections, then they're probably going to lose, because roughly 2/3 of Americans, majority of Americans, actually are pro-choice, and even a lot of Republicans, because with this bill, that it goes to show you that if you are a Republican, and your number one issue, main focus for an election is to be, that you are pro-life, you're probably going to not do well, and you're probably going to lose, because, abortion is very popular among most Americans. Roughly 63% actually approve of a woman's right to choose, while just a third don't. So, yeah, if Republicans run on this stance of being pro-life, they're probably going to lose in 2024, so they shouldn't do that. And if they do, I don't know why they're doing that in the first place. So basically, Ohio voters participated recently in a special election to decide issue 1, in Ohio, the state of Ohio specifically, a ballot measure that seeks to make it more difficult to amend the state's constitution through future ballot initiatives. If it were to be passed, which it actually failed, so that it's not get passed, future ballot measures will require 60% of the votes to pass, rather than just a simple majority. Now, with it not passing, with it actually failing, a simple majority is going to remain. This comes ahead of, like I mentioned earlier, a November vote, which Ohio voters will ultimately vote this November on whether to codify abortion rights. So, like I mentioned earlier, Republicans had to scramble because they knew this upcoming November, their voters, Ohio voters specifically, is going to vote in November. This November, Ohio voters will vote this November on whether to codify abortion rights or not. And Republicans knew that the election in November, whether to codify abortion rights, is probably going to go in the pro-choice favor. So what they had to do is make a proposal, and it ended up failing. It ended up ultimately exploding right in their faces, backfiring. Basically, they knew Ohio is a red state. Ohio Republicans knew that Ohio is a red state, so they took advantage of that, and they were like, okay, let's just have a proposal, and it's probably going to go in our favors because we're a red state and all. But it actually didn't go in their way, because majority of Americans, this goes to show you that whether you're on the right or the left, your majority are pro-choice, even on the right. Issue 1 is passed, which it didn't. It will make it more difficult for the abortion rights ballot measure to pass in this November. Now, it did not pass. It failed. So it will not be difficult for the abortion rights movement this November, which backfired on Ohio Republicans. And what does this ultimately mean for the 2024 election is, if you're a Republican, do not run on the stance that you are pro-life. I mean, you can say you are, but if you're going to push it into voters' throats, they're probably not going to like that, because roughly 2/3 of Americans are pro-choice. And with that being a good amount of Republicans actually too are pro-choice. So if you're going to shove being pro-life into voters' throats, they're not going to like that. So if you're a Republican running for a race, whether it's the Senate, the general election, or the governor's race in the year of 2024, do not run on the stance of pro-life. I mean, you can say it once or twice. You can, throw the notion that you are pro-life and you are anti-abortion. But if you're going to consistently run on that as your number one issue and make it as a priority issue, do not do that, because you're probably not going to win. What Republicans should avoid heading into 2024's elections is to not make, pro-life your number one priority issue. You should Republicans heading into 2024 should make their issues their priority issues, such as the economy, inflation, and other stuff, rather than abortion. Because where Republicans lose the most in American politics nowadays is the issue of abortion. Republicans struggle on the issue of abortion more than anything else. That's the truth. The number one issue that Republicans struggle the most on is abortion. Republicans in 2024 should not run a pro-life campaign. Instead, they should focus on issues that would, I would say, negatively affect Biden, negatively affect Biden, rather than, oh, I'm this pro-life candidate, you should vote me, I'm anti-abortion, because that's probably not going to work, as 2/3 of Americans are pro-choice, including a good amount of Republicans. So there you guys go. This is pretty much the video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the results of Ohio issue 1 and what you think Ohio's going to do in November, because in the November election of Ohio, it's probably still going to go in favor of the pro-choice movement. And Republicans knew that it was going to go in the pro-choice movement, so they had to make a proposal, and it ultimately failed, backfired in their face. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section down below, and how do you think this will affect the 2024 elections? And don't forget to subscribe if you aren't already.